Hi, I'm Brent Haynes with Woodsound Flutes, and I am so happy to be able to share with you an extremely gorgeous instrument that I have been dreaming of creating since 2013. This flute in my hands is a mid-G flute. It's made from Dream Amboyna Burl, Brazilian Rosewood Burl, walrus ivory, silver, gold, and silver and gold and walrus ivory down here in this inlay. It's exceptionally beautiful. When I see a flute like this, even though I was the one that created it, I am amazed. I'm amazed at the beauty of the materials. I'm delighted with the way that we were able to work them and to create this instrument. And I also love the spirit and the essence of what this flute is about, the purposes and the intents that were put into the instrument in its creation, the feelings of spirit, the feelings of love that were all held in place as this instrument was being made. Many of you may know that Brazilian rosewood is a very rare and precious wood. It's extremely wonderful for acoustic instruments. Perhaps the number one acoustic wood that we have available, period. Of course, that could be debatable, but it'd be a hard debate to make that it wasn't the best. For guitars, I play guitar. I play a few different other instruments as well. But when I go to play an instrument to gain my own inner peace and to relax and to kind of put work and the stresses of life behind me a little bit for a bit, I typically go to a guitar. The reason for me is simply that, well, it was one of my first instruments to really fall in love with. And also, I make flutes, and so flutes are my work. And sometimes I go to the flute just for relaxation and just for many of the things that you go to the flute for. But often I'll go to the guitar for that kind of thing just because I don't get the opportunity to play it as much as I perhaps would like. And in guitars, Martin guitar, of course, is famous. Their pre-World War One or World War II guitars are absolutely historically famous for the sweetness of the sound, for the roundness of the voice, for their projection, and all the beautiful qualities of a fine acoustic instrument. And nearly all of those pre-war guitars were made with back and sides of Brazilian rosewood. And the reason is because of the acoustic signature of that specific rosewood. This is Brazilian Rosewood Burl. A burl is different than regular wood. We'll call it straight grain wood that comes from a trunk or a branch where the grain is relatively straight through the piece, but the burl comes from a growth that happens on the tree. This growth typically happens because of a bacterial infection, perhaps a virus infection or a fungus infection, but most often because of a bacterial infection. You can also have burl growths happen because of some impact in the tree, like it gets hit by another tree hard and it damages the wood in a way that the tree tries to heal that wound by overgrowing that particular area. And so in the tree, the burl is really a chaotic growth of cells. Every cell is trying to become its own tree. Often, like on the Dream Amboyna Burl, you see these little eyes. You see some of those in the Brazilian Rosewood Burl too, or these streak lines here. Those streak lines that you see are actually the same eyes, these little dots that you see, but seen from the side rather than from the top. And so it's kind of like every cell trying to grow a new tree. And that massive growth creates in the tree often a kind of a round nodule. Frequently it'll happen down by roots. In fact, redwood trees will reproduce using burls down at the roots, but they can also grow on the trunk or on branches in different areas on the tree as well. So finding a burl on a regular tree, like let's say box elder, is you can find them sometimes. Not on every single tree, but in box elder trees here in Utah, I'd guess that probably maybe 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 box elder trees have some sort of a significant burl growth on them. And it depends on the soil. Here in Utah, the burl growth on a box elder is caused by a very specific bacteria. And so if the bacteria is in the soil, you often will find the burls on the tree. But Brazilian rosewood does not get burls like other trees. Nowhere near the same kind of quantity. Maybe 1 in 20 Brazilian rosewood trees, some other number, some other small percentage of the trees will actually have a burl. And the problem with burls is they're harder to work. They're harder to process. If you're a lumberjack, you're cutting trees and processing trees, you love a tree that's just long and straight and no funky things going on it, because that tree is going to process very easily through the equipment, and you're going to be able to mill it up properly very easily. A burl, on the other hand, is kind of the other side of that. It's where it's more difficult. It just is a lot more difficult to process, even if you're just cutting it on a regular bandsaw. And then working it into a final product is also more difficult. Because of the chaotic nature of the grain, it can chip out, it can do all sorts of crazy things that you just don't have those same sorts of problems on a straight grain piece of wood. However, when you spend the time and the attention to take that wood that grew through this chaotic nature in the tree and work it lovingly into a final product, you end up with something that's far more beautiful, far more interesting and captivating to the mind and the imagination than a straight grain piece of wood. And that's what we've got here with this Brazilian rosewood. And so often, if someone's out harvesting wood, often they will actually leave burls and things like that in my opinion, are the more interesting, more beautiful pieces of wood. They'll leave them and they actually put them in what they call slash piles and burn them, because they just simply don't want to deal with all of the things that come with a burl. For example, one of the other things that happens with burls is they tend to have a lot more oil in them, and they tend to be denser than a straight grain piece of wood. And those two things, what I just said, in my opinion, are two of the things that make for a really fantastic flute wood. High density and high oil content. You get those two things together and you often end up with an instrument that just has body and projection and warmth and wholesomeness. I mean, this feeling of reaching around, giving you a big hug, that sort of feeling in the sound. So I love burls and I love crazy grain wood. But people harvesting it would often just throw it away. So getting a burl from any tree is rare compared to getting the straight grain wood. But getting Brazilian rosewood burl is extremely rare. In fact, I've been making flutes now professionally since 2002, so it's been 20 years. This is our 20-year anniversary, I suppose, of flute making. In fact, it probably was about, I believe it was May when Gary Latham bought the first flute from me that allowed me to buy the bandsaw. And many of you may know that story. And that was the start of Woodsounds. That's what got me started in making flutes. So it's been about 20 years now. And I've seen Brazilian Rosewood Burl of any kind of significant size. You know, you see some knife blanks or pistol grip blanks. You're talking about pieces that are like maybe 3/8 inch thick by maybe 5 inches by a couple of inches. I've seen pieces of wood like that were Brazilian rosewood that had little bits of burl here and there in them. But one time, only once, in all those years, and I have looked, I've spent hours and hours and hours looking. One time have I seen a Brazilian rosewood burl that was enough to make a flute from, and was a piece of wood that was burl from one end to the other. The slab that I bought, this piece of wood came from, was about 24 inches in diameter and about 2 inches thick. That piece of wood came from the Dale Nish hoard, is what I like to call it. You may know that story from previous videos that I've done, but in 2013, Dale Nish passed away. And Dale Nish was a wood collector. He loved amazing woods, and he had an eye for it. He had an eye for selecting the best looking material. Absolutely incredible. His son Brian wanted to start a business when he was in his 20s, and he approached his dad, Dale. This is back, I think, in the late 70s. And Dale said, hey, Brian, I got an idea. I think that we could start a business that focused on supplying wood and tooling to people that turn wood. Wood turners is what they call them. And that's what, like with a lathe and gouges and, taking and turning a square piece of material into round and whatnot. It's kind of a specific part of woodworking. And he started woodturnerscatalog.com, aka Craft Supply USA. And several years later, his other son started with his father a sister company called treelineusa.com, and they focus in on carving. So any kind of carving, whether it's knife carving or carving with rotary tools or carving with axes, any of that kind of carving is what Treeline USA does. And both of these companies are right next to each other in Provo, Utah, and they happen to be a local company for me. I became great friends with a gentleman named Brandon who works for Treeline USA. And Brandon is the gentleman that purchases all of the wood now for Craft Supply. He'll do trips, different places, finding wood. Anyways, at one point he called me up. He says, "Hey Brent, Dale passed away, and they are going to empty his home, and I think you ought to come down here and take a look at what they're bringing out." You got to understand, Dale was a collector of wood in a big way, and he would get the best woods that he could because he's buying lots of wood, but he would cherry pick the very best looking materials, and he'd take them down, put them in his basement. And Brandon says to me, "Brent, you wouldn't believe it." He says, literally, it's floor to ceiling stacks of wood. No organization, nothing like that. Just stacks of wood. And it is incredible, incredible things that Dale put away. And so I bought a number of different pieces of wood from Brandon back in that time, or Craft Supply back in that time. If you have an amazingly figured flute from Woodsounds from 2013 to 15 or so, there's a good chance it came from that Dale Nish hoard, because it was amazing materials we had. And one of those pieces was this slab, this 24-inch diameter slab, 2 inches thick, of Brazilian rosewood. And when Brandon called me and told me he had a Brazilian rosewood burl, I didn't believe him. Honestly, I thought it was Honduran rosewood burl, because I hadn't seen it. I had just never seen Brazilian Rosewood Burl ever available, let alone very, very few products I'd ever seen made from it. And so I really didn't believe that it was Brazilian until I went down and he and I did several different tests to verify and validate the wood was Brazilian rosewood. And once I had validated it, I thought, man, I've got to have this. Yeah. Anyways, it's a fun story, but it was so worth it, and I was so excited to begin making flutes from it. And we made a number of incredible instruments from this wood. You can see them on our website if you search under Brazilian rosewood. And I've never seen it available since. In fact, the only time I have any knowledge of anybody having any supply of Brazilian Rosewood Burl was, gosh, it was probably about 5 years ago. Brandon had done a trip back east to buy a bunch of maple burl and some other woods that he was targeting. And when he got back, he said, Brent, I saw the most incredible collection of wood I've ever seen. He said, this guy he's in the deep woods of Maine, and he's got several different warehouses absolutely full of wood, and he has got a bunch of Brazilian rosewood and Brazilian rosewood burl. I said, dude, hook me up. He says, he won't sell it. He's just collecting it. Yeah, this guy apparently wouldn't sell it at all. I always hope that at some point he'll decide to sell it and we may get some more. But that's the only times, 2 times in 20 years that I've ever even seen material from Brazilian Rosewood Burl that could be made into flutes, or possibly made into flutes, because I don't know what that other guy had, and frankly hadn't seen it. So it's extremely rare, and extremely beautiful, and absolutely a perfect material for making a flute from. So when I cut that wood and made all those different flutes from it, the Brazilian Rosewood Burl flutes that I've made, I ended up with 3 remaining pieces. This one, 2 others that are up in my office right now that were left. And I decided that I would put them away and wait. I just felt like there was going to be an opportunity at some point in the future to use some really incredible materials and combine them and really make something extremely special. And so I put them away. And that idea that there would come a time when I would be able to make something really special from this Brazilian Rosewood Burl, it began developing in me a dream of elevating my ability to create, my craftsmanship, to a level, my art, to a level that would really truly show this wood in an amazing way. And I ended up setting a goal for myself. And please don't take the wrong message from this goal. But my goal was to make a flute that was a $10,000 or more flute. An instrument that had a value that for me at that time seemed like so high that I couldn't hardly even imagine somebody being willing and desiring to pay that kind of amount for an instrument that I created from these special materials. And I could have rushed into it and just made the flutes and sold them and, benefited my family at that moment. But it became way more than the money for me. The money was just a measuring stick. It was from the very beginning, frankly. Just a way of measuring my own personal dedication to my art, and also a way of measuring other people's acceptance of what I'm doing and validation of what I'm doing. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. I really would hope that doesn't come across wrong because, the money, of course, is important in that it's what's needed in order to continue. But in this particular case, it is very much about trying to measure my own art, my own craft. And so I set that goal for myself, and I've had many different ideas over the years about different instruments and different ways that I could build the instrument and ways, inlays and whatnot that we could do. In fact, the Flute of the Month Club began because I knew I needed a tool that would continue to push my creative abilities and continue to push me in developing instruments and intent and thoughtfulness in those instruments on a regular basis. And I started that initially with the hopes that I would develop ideas and techniques that eventually would allow me to create my $10,000 flute. And so I have. Here it is. And I'm very pleased with it. The materials, I told you the materials all came from a special place. The Brazilian Rosewood Burl came through the relationship with Brandon. Had I not that great friendship with Brandon, I would never have even known about it. The Dream Amboyna Burl, I've talked about that so much over the last few months that I don't think I need to dive into that story right now about getting that wood. But it is super, super precious. These are the two most precious woods, in my opinion, that I've ever worked with. Ever. In all the years of making flutes. These are the two that are the most beautiful, the most acoustically vibrant, just fabulous. But the ivory and the silver on this also came from a great relationship with a good friend named Duffy Owens up in Washington. Duffy is an incredible guy, super talented musician, and a super wonderful person. He's become a good friend of our families. He and my son Tanner became really great friends at one of the Flute Quest festivals. Duffy knows all my kids, and my kids all know him, and he used to do a lot of jewelry making. He made a lot of beautiful jewelry, silversmithing, but even to the point of cutting and faceting his own gems. And he had a number of different materials that he would use in the creation of his jewelry, including this walrus ivory. When I initially got the tusk, it was about this long. And I think the first day I cut just a thin sliver off of it, polished it up, sanded it and polished it really super smooth, just a little disc of this material, and I slipped it in my pocket. I don't know where it is now, but but I would walk around with that little piece of ivory in my pocket and, periodically just reach my hand down in there and feel it. I just love the feel of it. But it's probably been, oh gosh, it's got to have been at least 5 years, if not more, since Duffy and I traded for that ivory. And I never had used it on a flute. Because, I don't know, it's so cool as a full tusk. It was just so cool and I enjoyed it so much that I didn't really want to cut it up. But when we started with this flute, I knew I needed to take that material and make it part of this instrument because to me, it's precious. I value the tusk because of my relationship with Duffy. And I value it because it's so beautiful. And I value it because it came from such a majestic animal. And I suspect one of the cool things about walrus ivory and walrus jawbone is that most of those materials that we get nowadays come from modern Inuit Indians digging through their ancestral midden heaps of where their ancestors dumped all the leftovers from what they had eaten and the animals that they had harvested and whatnot. And they'll dig through these piles and find bones and whatnot that they then can sell to places that can utilize that material in making jewelry, making carvings, and all sorts of things. And I love that fact too, because you have the ancestors living from this animal, this glorious animal that they had to kill in order for survival. And they killed the animal. They use as much as they possibly can. What they can't use, they discarded. And today, modern Indians go in there and are able to take those waste products from their ancestors and turn them into something that allows them to eat today and to live today. I think it's beautiful. It's a beautiful circle of life. So also the silver on this flute also came from a trade with Duffy. He and I did a trade for a bunch of silver that he had from his jewelry making days. And the last material on here is gold. And you've got this gold that comes around this inlay down here. We've got gold dots inlaid in the ivory. And for me, the gold it was difficult to buy. The gold in here is gold that I purchased from Rio Grande. It's crazy how expensive gold is. It just blows my mind. And you know, it's funny. I spent a big chunk of money on getting this gold, and you know, to me right now, it doesn't look like all that much. It was just a couple of pieces of wire, some round wire and square wire. But I only had so much to work with, and everything I bought went into the flute. And I actually did this inlay down here a couple of times. And the first time I did it, I thought I'd gotten all the gold deep enough into the wood and everything. And when I sanded it, all of a sudden I started sanding through the gold and it was just gone. I was like, oh no. And so I had to go back in and re-inlay it. And then we ended up getting even a little bit of sand through on it here and there. And the problem is, if I continued sanding it and whatnot, I would have lost all of the gold that went into it and lost all the inlay. And so it's an interesting balance of, you know, making it as beautiful as you possibly can, and also recognizing that if you work something too much, you could screw up the whole thing. And so we balanced that the best we could on this flute, and I am very, very pleased with the end result. I'll go ahead and play it again for you right now. Oh, I want to talk about one last thing. So you notice the shape of this inlay down here, and this inlay is here because there was a natural void that was in the blank that I started with. And I chose that blank specifically because of that void, because I knew that whenever you have some kind of a traumatic thing in a tree, whether it be a wormhole or whether sometimes it's a knot, and sometimes it's a natural void like this. Whenever you have something like that, that's most often the wood around that is most often the most beautiful wood in the entire piece of material that you're working with. I was thinking about this earlier and I thought it's not unlike how my parents used to say, you need to eat closer to the bone. Get that meat that's closer to the bone. It's the sweetest meat on the bone. You know, telling me to be conscientious and, you know, making sure we use everything. But with wood particularly, it is certainly the truth. This gray-green coloring that you see around this inlay is there. It's called spalting. It happens from bacteria being in that void, and the void creates the opportunity for the bacteria to get in there. You can see similar things with a wood called ambrosia maple. Ambrosia maple is created when worms eat through the wood. And typically on ambrosia maple, there'll be two wormholes that will go up through the wood. And all around the wormhole, you'll have lines, these really characteristic lines that are created because of the bacteria and the spalting that takes place. And I used this blank because I wanted whatever was created because of that natural void. So the shape of it, of this inlay, was determined by what that void looked like. And when I finished with it, it looked like a polar bear to me. I kept thinking of a polar bear every time I looked at this inlay. Eventually, that's what led to us choosing a polar bear for the totem. But also, so let's talk about the totem for a minute. So we've got this beautiful polar bear, and he is sitting over an opening in the ice. The ice is, in this case, would be the sapwood of this totem, which is on the Dream Amboyna. And he's sitting there waiting for a seal or a walrus to come up through the ice so that he can get some dinner himself. So when I was determining how I wanted to shape that water, I decided that I wanted it to mimic, to some degree, the shape of this inlay here. Trying to keep intention throughout the entire instrument is how we try to do things. In fact, if you really look at the totem, we got the bear sitting on a base of Dream Amboyna Burl, and you can see how the sapwood of this Dream Amboyna Burl plays with the sapwood of the Brazilian Rosewood Burl, and the angles that they take are mirrored in that. And you also can see that some of the Dream Amboyna Burl on the totem is heartwood, the red. And in my mind, what I was actually thinking about was the melting of the polar ice caps. And that we have some that's melted, a little bit that's not, being the sapwood. And it was one of the reasons that I chose the polar bear for the totem, to bring some awareness of the delicate nature of our existence on this planet and our ability to adversely affect the planet around us, the environment, everything around us, whether it be people, animals, plants, landscape, what have you. And really anything that we do, just living, is going to cause an impact on other things. So it's not about, man is bad and all that. It's not about that at all. I mean, for crying out loud, even an ant has an impact on the local environment around it. You go look at a fire ant hill out in the deserts here in Utah, and it is just decimated. All around the ant hill is decimated. 5-6 feet out. There's no plant life. It has a very specific look to it because of the activity of those ants. And I think that we're very much the same. We do have an impact. And so the idea with the flute is simply being aware. Just being aware of the impact that we have on other people, on the landscape, the land, the planet, and then doing the best we can to be responsible in that regard. And so we actually tried to name this flute several times. One of the original names that we had for it was sustainability. We take a small amount of super, super rare, and in Brazilian Rosewood's case, went to the point of endangered for existence, the tree. We take these materials, just a small amount of them, and create something so beautiful from them. And one of the hopes that I have with that, and not just for this flute, but all the flutes that we make, is that by using a small amount of a precious material, the wood, we can bring some awareness to the fact that The trees are precious and they're critical for life on this planet. They're critical for the oxygenation, and 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 not to feel bad about what we use, but simply to try and help us each make better, more responsible decisions as best we can. So sustainability was one of the first names that I thought of for the flute. And then the idea, I didn't really love it completely. It didn't have everything I thought we wanted to convey. And so then I thought maybe we should call it awareness. And I like that name too. That's a good name. But it just didn't fit completely 100%. And so Pablo came up with an idea. As we were watching a movie, he says, "Oh, I got a name." He says, "How about survival?" Right? Because the bear's surviving, looking for his food, and we want the survival of not just all these materials for future, but also of our planet. And so I thought that's a pretty good name too. But it felt a little bit too desperate to me too. I don't think we need to walk around feeling desperate for everything, but rather just being aware. And so still didn't feel like we had the name totally dialed. So my shop manager, Josh, came up with a couple of names. The first one he came to me with was Perseverance. And I loved that name because there was a poem that my dad gave me when I first started Woodsounds, back when we were really struggling establishing a name for ourselves and even being able to develop an instrument that was of a quality high enough that I felt that it was worthy of selling. And so many personal struggles back in those days. And my dad had this poem. I wish I had it to read to you right now. But it had the elements of it were like, intelligence is not enough. Talent is not enough. The only thing that will take you to success is perseverance. Something like that. It's more in depth than that. And so I love that idea of perseverance. And Josh was thinking about the bear sitting there waiting for the food to come up, just persevering through the rigors of sitting there patiently, quietly. And so I thought that was a pretty good name, but still didn't have everything that I thought it needed. And then this morning I went out and was talking to him. He says, "Oh, Brent, I had a new idea for the name last night. I had a dream." He says, "How about Reflection?" And I love that name. I love the name Reflection. It's a play, of course, on the silver water inlay and the reflection of the bear in that silver. And also a play on the idea of us being reflective in our thinking and in what we do and our actions and so on. It's a beautiful name. And yet still I don't feel like it's quite the right name. So what we're going to do is allow this flute to be named by the person that purchases it. When you purchase the flute, we'll go ahead and engrave the name underneath the logo here for you. And that will become the name of this instrument. I hope you enjoy this flute, and if you have a dream flute, you have something you would like to talk about being created for you, I would love to talk to you about it. I got to tell you, I'm super excited for you to have the opportunity to see this flute being made. Pablo has been here now for a month. He flies out tonight in just a couple of hours. And he has spent this last month here in the shop videoing me in all sorts of different things and all sorts of processes that we go through to make these instruments, to create some videos for you. I think there's 4 different flutes that we went through. You can see this. You can see a little bit of this in process video on Elegance and Beauty from the Wood to the Sound, which is in the very last video we uploaded to YouTube. And we'll put a link to that in the description as well. But Pablo has just been incredible in what he's put together. His vision for conveying ideas and conveying the forward momentum of the creation process is fabulous. Pablo is actually the gentleman that redid the Woodsounds logo. I love it. He brought elements into the new logo that I didn't even recognize I hadn't put in that are so important. You know, having the players on the same side of the tree engaging with each other, playing the flute, spot on. Some beautiful things. He's also done the outro video that you'll see at the end of this video, as well as previous YouTube vids, really trying to help me up the game of presenting to you what we are trying to do at Woodsounds, the quality that we want to bring to you, the quality that we currently bring to you, and the beauty of the sound and the beauty of the woods. And I really appreciate his efforts. And so anyways, I hope you enjoy this. We'll also, I got to just put a quick thing in here for him. You really need to go check out Pablo's YouTube channel. We'll put a link to it in the description as well. Pablo is an amazing musician. He has an intense love affair with acoustic instruments. He plays many different acoustic instruments, guitar, of course. He actually makes some instruments, the Japanese shamisen instrument, which is a 3-stringed instrument, incredibly complex to create because it has these joins that have to be super, super tight so that the instrument sounds proper and has the right kind of visual look. Really super, super talented as an instrument maker as well. But you gotta go check out his music. His wife is a violinist. Her mother was a concert violinist as well. And she has been playing violin since I think age 4 and living it from the moment of creation for her. The violin for her is not an instrument. It's an extension of her. Really amazing to watch her play. Absolutely fabulous. So I hope you enjoy this. And if you have questions, let me know. So I'm going to play a little bit of Fly Me to the Moon, Frank Sinatra, for you right now. I haven't figured the whole song out. At some point, I hope to have this song tabulated out for you so that you can enjoy. It's a little bit of a tricky song because the range is greater than the native flute. So at some point, I've got to make some decisions whether I'm going to change the bottom note or the top notes. But this is for my wife. God bless. I hope you have a wonderful day. Whether you're dreaming of your first native flute or wanting to create some custom instrument, Woodsounds is where your dreams can be made real. My name is Brent Haynes, and you can reach me at 801-822-1415 or brent@woodsounds.com. Have a great day.